Ohio, Donald Trump is ahead by 5 percentage points. In North Carolina, Clinton leads by 3. And in Pennsylvania, Clinton leads by 5 points in one poll and 4 in another. In Wisconsin, where Donald Trump campaigned yesterday and Mark Halperin was, Clinton is still up by 6, while her advantage in Colorado has shrunk to 3 points, while in Virginia, she's up by 5 percentage points. And finally, in Arizona, the state just last week that her campaign was talking about winning, Donald Trump holds a 5-point advantage. We also have a new Bloomberg Politics Purple Slice poll, national poll of independent voters. It shows Clinton with a small lead among that group, 30 to 27%. Man, that is a lot of data. So, Mark, you've been out on the campaign trail. You've been up in Wisconsin, as I said. You're in Iowa today. You've been with Rudy Giuliani, Paul Ryan, Bill Clinton, all over the place. In this jumble of data, as you look at it from your vantage on the campaign trail, what is standing out to you right now?
Well, look, the two campaigns agree, Trump and Clinton, that her lead has narrowed nationally and in the key battleground states. It's funny, you and I both have the same experience every 4 years. If your campaign and the public or private data says you're up 3, you say, we got it, we got a solid 3-point lead, we're fine. If you're down 3, you say, aha, we're closing the gap, 3 points, we can overcome that through enthusiasm. So I would say that Donald Trump has, everyone agrees, and the public data backs us up, closed the gap. But there's still no, under the current public polling, there's obviously no plausible path to 270 electoral votes. He's got more to do if he's going to be in the game in less than a week.
Right. I mean, you look at this, and one of the biggest, one of the biggest changes is that a week ago, smart people that we know were saying that the only suspense left in this election was whether Hillary Clinton would end up between 350 and 400 electoral votes. No one's talking like that anymore. But again, you look at all of these battleground state polls, and the states that Hillary Clinton needs to win, she's where she kind of has been. If you look at the whole of the last 3 months, she's got a small but stable lead in a lot of battleground states. And as you said, right now, if you look at all this data, there's not really a path for Donald Trump. Again, he's within the margin of error in a lot of places. He's within striking distance in a lot of places, but he is more behind than he is narrowing the gap to the place where he would want to be 6 days out.
Yeah, and even as Clinton plays defense in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, by going herself and having surrogates visit, she still can look at the map and say, unless there's just a huge national shock, she's going to win enough states, hold most of the blue states, and win enough blue states, and maybe North Carolina, in order to get to 270. So she can, barring a national shock and many states ending up different than the public data, she's got it.
Right. And look, I mean, again, that's just, the way you have to look at this on some level is 6 days out, whose hand would you rather be playing? Would you rather be playing her hand or his hand? There's no doubt you'd rather be playing her hand.
All right, so let's talk about the Trump hand. I'm here in Waterloo, Iowa. Bill Clinton, an event this evening. Paul Ryan doing an event not for Donald Trump, but for the local congressman here. Iowa, like a lot of battleground states now, it's hard to move more than just a few inches around without seeing some major national player, either a presidential candidate or one of their top surrogates. And of course, all anyone really wants to know right now, here in Iowa and elsewhere, is the answer to one question. Is Trump cutting into Clinton's lead, or is he not? We just talked about the fact that the national and state surveys suggest he's cutting into the lead, but not enough yet to get all the way there. For a while, I've been saying that there are certain things Trump would need to do if he's going to be in a position to pull off an upset in this presidential contest. A surge in national polls was one of the things. We've seen that in the ABC News Washington Post tracking poll, but not a significant surge in any other major national polls. Trump also had to show more message discipline, I thought. He had to lock into some new Clinton controversies, and there had to be this expansion of the electoral map that there's indications of. So, John, if you look at my whole checklist, how many of those things has Trump done? Again, not to go ahead, but to put himself in the game.
I think it's fair to say that about half of those, you could look at that checklist and say that he's accomplished about half of them. Some of these things are going to be questions about what you meant with your language. I mean, what we're not seeing is a surge in Donald Trump's polling standing. That's not there. He's creeping into a more competitive position, but not surging. He's had a little luck. He has a little bit of a sense of momentum, but he's still playing defense in places like Arizona, and he's still not really driving. I know he's trying to drive, but but he's not really driving, to my mind, a really potent message of change. I know you have thoughts about this list that are probably more nuanced than mine, but he's making some progress on some fronts on that list.
Yeah, if you put the list back up, I'd say the two right now that are both keeping Trump and his supporters energized, but also maybe creating a bit of an illusion, is the first thing on that list, winning news cycles. Trump went weeks after the Access Hollywood tape not winning a single news cycle. He's won several in a row now. That gives him a sense of momentum, which is number 10 on my list. You know, talking to Rudy Giuliani earlier today, covering Trump's rally last night, looking at the rhetoric from his campaign, they can go out and they can say a bunch of stuff ripped from the headlines every day now that gives them a sense that, hey, things are moving our way. Like I said, that's a positive for the Republicans because it gives them a sense of upbeat spirit, right. But it also can create a bit of an illusion. It can make them think the polls are tightening faster and more than they actually are.
Right. And God knows we saw that in 2012 with the atmospherics around Mitt Romney's campaign. Here's a really important thing that we don't discuss enough. You know, we talk about early voting sometime on the show, but we saw some polling last night that suggests that Hillary Clinton is winning overwhelmingly with the early vote in Florida. We can't know for sure, but one of the things that's happening here is that even if all these things go Trump's way in this last week, there's been a lot of votes cast already, and Hillary Clinton may already have a substantial and maybe even decisive advantage in some states because of the early vote. All right, so both candidates are honing their closing pitch to voters in this final week. And Donald Trump is out with a new ad today called United. It showcases a more uplifting message than we're used to seeing from the GOP nominee. A GOP nominee who used his convention speech to describe a country with, quote, violence in our streets and chaos in our communities. These days, Trump's stump speech, while still harping on the rigged system and alleged corruption in Clinton world, is also replete with optimistic rhetoric like this.
Hillary wants us to think small, wants us to believe things can't change, and wants our lives to revolve around Washington, D.C. I am asking you to dream big, to push for bold change, and to believe in a movement powered by the people and by their love of this great country. I'm tired of politicians telling Americans to defer their dreams to another day when they really mean another decade. America is tired of waiting. The moment is now. There is no challenge too great and no dream outside of our reach. There is not. There is no dream outside of our reach. Don't let anyone tell you it can't be done. The future lies with the dreamers, not the cynics and not the critics.
That was Donald Trump last night in Wisconsin. Future lies with the dreamers. All right, today at a rally in Miami, Trump repeated some of those lines, but also returned to his favorite go-to topics, WikiLeaks, and amid new reports that a Justice Department official involved in the Clinton email probe apparently gave the Clinton campaign a heads up about when congressional oversight hearings were going to take place and when Clinton's emails were going to be made public. So, Mark, as Trump plays these dual roles of attack dog and also inspirational, motivational speaker, how much does it matter that he's added some of these dollops of optimism to his repertoire?
Again, like a lot of things that are going right for Trump these days, it's not decisive by any means, but I'm thinking it's certainly helpful. I had one person who's watched Trump very closely after watching last night's speech in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, say if that had been the speech he gave at the convention rather than the darker speech he gave, this would have been a much different race for the Republicans during the summer. So I think it's helpful. People like an optimistic candidate. They like an optimistic president. Hillary Clinton toggles back and forth between optimistic and dark as well, but Trump has rarely been as optimistic in any speech I've heard him give as he was last night.
Yes, I mean, the part of the problem for Trump is that when he strikes those notes, at least to my ear, they sound so inconsistent and so discordant with the way in which he's campaigned for the past year and a half that they sound sort of false to me, right? And yes, I agree with you. This will now be like the third or fourth instance where we've cited a thing that if Trump had started campaigning in a different way and then in a disciplined way done it over the course of the months since May or June, the campaign would be in a different place. He hasn't done that, though, and so when you hear him talking about the dreamers and dreaming, you sort of think, who is that guy? Not like, oh, that's the Donald Trump that I've always known and loved.
Yeah, I mean, look, before he was a presidential candidate, I heard him talk optimistically like that quite a bit. There's always been dark in there. We'll see if he keeps up the optimism in the advertising and in his stump speech. All right, we'll take a break. Up next, Hillary Clinton and her surrogates continue their blue state tour. More dates announced today. We'll discuss that and more right after this. Welcome back to Waterloo, Iowa, where Bill Clinton's doing a rally for his wife tonight. The feud between the Democratic Party and the FBI continued today when President Obama, in an interview with Now This News, was asked about FBI Director James Comey's decision just a few days ago to inform Congress about its revived look into Hillary Clinton's email server. In sort of a backhanded way, President Obama both took a shot at the FBI chief, but also said that the recent move won't impact how voters feel about the presidential race.
There is a norm that, when there are investigations, we don't operate on innuendo, we don't operate on incomplete information, we don't operate on leaks. We operate based on concrete decisions that are made.
White House played down the president's remarks, but they come a day after the FBI released old, heavily redacted documents related to the 2001 investigation into Bill Clinton's controversial presidential pardon of the fugitive Mark Rich. The FBI says that the posting was in response to a routine FOIA request. So, John, what is going on with the FBI and James Comey as a player right now in this presidential race?
Well, I think the FBI, I mean, you and I are in agreement about the inappropriateness of what Comey did in July, the inappropriateness of what he did on Friday, and I think this thing the FBI did yesterday is crazy. It's just crazy that they are that they're injecting themselves into the race in this way. And the only way in which, well, I think it's crazy, number one, and number two, it's, I think, in a weird way now actually starting to help the Clinton campaign because it's making them such a ripe, fat target for the campaign of discrediting that the Democrats want to do. The thing yesterday was just, I mean, I can't figure out what's going on there. The FBI, though, is really kind of out of control.
whoever handles public affairs over there needs to take James Comey aside and walk through the remainder of the time between now and Election Day. I know I've seen a few people defend him in the last couple of days, but for the most part, Democrats continue to be aggressive. The White House, as I said, playing down what President Obama said, but clearly it went farther than his spokesman Josh Earnest went. I believe in the Clinton campaign says that their data doesn't show any damage to them from Comey, and even the Republicans play down Comey as a factor as compared to just the drumbeat from the Affordable Care Act, as we've been discussing, to all the WikiLeaks disclosures. There's new WikiLeaks disclosures related to potential coordination between the Justice Department and the Clinton world and the State Department and Clinton world. I think those things are going to get a fair amount of attention pushed by the Republicans in the next couple of days.
I have to say, if the DOJ manages somehow to get through, or the FBI manages to get through these emails from Weiner's computer before Election Day, and whatever they show, I now feel like they almost have an obligation to report to the country on what they found or haven't found, because this whole thing is just that they got us into this mess with this vagary and innuendo. They need to resolve it, I think, before Election Day in terms of what they find.
Maybe if they've got something resolved enough to say.
Yeah, right. All right. Donald Trump has been spending an awful lot of time in traditionally Democratic-leaning states this week. For a while, that didn't seem to bother the Clinton campaign. But down in this final stretch here, Hillary Clinton and her surrogates are spending valuable time and resources, not just in toss-up states such as Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina, but also in blue states that just a week ago were considered safely, securely in her column. Today, Bernie Sanders and Chelsea Clinton are in Wisconsin. And on Friday, Hillary Clinton is heading to Michigan for a campaign event in Detroit. Vice President Joe Biden will be in Madison, Wisconsin. So, Mark, we talked yesterday about how the Clinton campaign is going on the air with big ad buys in several of these deep blue states. 24 hours later, what more do we know?
Well, in talking to the Clinton campaign, they claim this is not panic. This is not seeing their numbers crater. They simply believe that it's prudent, given that they have a lot of surrogates and that Hillary Clinton has a lot of money in her bank account, to make sure they're playing defense in these states. The other thing is you've got Clinton supporters in places like Michigan and Wisconsin who are from the bedwetter category, who are screaming and saying, you need to fight to save this state or you'll lose it. They're trying to keep that from being a firestorm, because those bedwetters, if they don't get what they want, will often leak to the press. The Clinton campaign isn't paying enough attention to our state.
Yeah, I mean, you can't overstate how much of that kind of howling occurs in the last days before a presidential election, where the local Democratic parties and local donors in various places start calling up the campaign and saying, oh my God, please send somebody here. If you don't, it's going to be a disaster. And so if you have the resources, and both human resources in terms of surrogates, and you have the financial resources to be on the air, there's just no good reason not to spend those resources, again, both financial and human, to try to calm those people down and play defense to the extent that defense is required.
Yeah, if you look at the Big Five right now, you'd have to say that Clinton's bad run has solidified Trump's position in both Iowa, here, and in Ohio. That still leaves him with three of the big three to try to win. The Silver State, as I like to call it, Florida and North Carolina. And then, of course, it's still, if he won them all, he'd still be 5 short, as we talk about all the time. So I think Clinton is trying to hedge against a possible loss for Trump, for her somewhere that Trump can make up with elsewhere. All right, up next, more from here in Waterloo, Iowa, right after this. I am here in Iowa where news broke overnight that 2 Des Moines area police officers were ambushed in their patrol cars, fatally shot. It's captivating the state. Talked to Governor Branstad about it earlier today. Police arrested a man, 46-year-old, earlier today in connection with these shootings, which have rocked the state. Governor Branstad told me that that's been his focus today, although campaigning goes on. Tim Kaine and Bill Clinton, however, canceled an event that was supposed to be held this evening in Des Moines, but Bill Clinton is set to speak here in Waterloo, east of Des Moines, where I am now, and joined by Christina Krippes, our political reporter for the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier here in this eastern part of the state. So you got a governor's race, a Senate race, you've got the presidential, and in this district, the Eastern District, which is a Democratic district, you've got an incumbent Republican, House Member Paul Ryan, here on his behalf today. Talk about how that House race might impact the presidential in this vote-rich part of the state.
It's an interesting race because Rod Blum is supposed to be one of the most vulnerable incumbents, but he hasn't really seemed like it, and he hasn't really been acting like it. He's had the benefit of Iowa being one of the few toss-up states or swing states that's leaning toward Donald Trump, so he hasn't really been acting like he's vulnerable.
This is a first-term Republican congressman in a district that voted overwhelmingly for President Obama twice. What has Congressman Blum said about Donald Trump throughout the campaign, and particularly after the Access Hollywood tape?
He has been very clear in his support. He doesn't go out of his way to mention Donald Trump, but he will, when asked, say specifically that Iowa is still behind Donald Trump.
The conventional wisdom and the public polling suggests Clinton has a lead here, and Trump has a lead here and has had a lead. How much has this part of the state been engaged with the presidential race?
It's been interesting because we haven't seen too much of the actual candidates. We've seen more surrogates, and this is about the second time I've seen Bill Clinton. So it's one of those areas where we're getting a lot more surrogates rather than the actual candidates themselves.
Okay, President Clinton is here, and he is speaking. So, Christina, thank you very much. And, John, we'll throw it back to you.
Welcome back. Coming back to the show, we're going to cut away from Mark Halpern there in Iowa and bring in Michael Steele, the former chairman of the Republican Party. Michael, you're in Washington, D.C. Good to see you. Give me a sense on the basis of what you know right now. We've been talking about the state of the race. It's all anybody really cares about right now. What's your sense of where we are?
It's very fascinating, man. There's I don't know where the energy is coming from, but Donald Trump seems to have garnered a great deal of energy from various pockets within the party and around the country. In listening to Kellyanne Conway today talk about this race, you really get the sense that they've got their fingers on something. Either they figured something out or something's moving in their direction. Now, this may be just a 24-hour thing on the heels of what's developed with Hillary Clinton, but there is a different kind of energy out there. I was just out today at a Starbucks just talking to folks, and it was surprising to me, almost a resignation that Trump could possibly win this thing here in the metro area. So it's a very different climate, I think, in the last 24 hours or so, and you're seeing it pop up in various parts of the country, and it's going to be interesting to see how the campaign galvanizes that, given the lack of organization, if we will say in the traditional sense, that they seem to have on the ground.
Michael, do you think that this is mostly driving from the shockwave from the Comey letter on Friday that's changed the dynamic in your view? Or do you think that this is just kind of more of a case of kind of natural tightening, Trump exercising some degree of discipline, finding his way to a different message? What are the factors you think that are core to the change that you see?
Actually, that's a good question, and I think the factors, I thought initially the factors driving that was the latter, that the Trump campaign has settled down on its message. Kellyanne had really drilled into Donald Trump. You've got to say this and do this in the last week of this campaign. But then all of a sudden the Comey thing hit. And it was a very different feel. All of a sudden, people sort of remember, oh, yeah, that. I forgot. I didn't like that about Hillary Clinton. And I think that's kind of moved into that space. Now, how much of that space it's going to occupy in the next few days, John, I think is really going to matter for the Trump campaign. And that means how they're able to capitalize on that, make that a much more integral part of their message, driving home their vote and getting their base excited. Right now, though, they seem to have a little bit more wind in their back than they had a week ago, and it's really kind of paying off in terms of what we're seeing in the polls.
All right. I agree with you, Michael. It seems as though there was something kind of, you could feel it out here. I'm out here in Utah. Mark's I've been out on the road in Wisconsin, Iowa. You can sort of feel that the wind and weather is changing. At the same time, just real quick, we saw this report from Florida yesterday, which suggested that Hillary Clinton has banked in a very large amount of early vote. There's a lot of battleground states where early vote has been going on for a while. Just give me a sense of whether you think that early vote may end up kind of overriding the importance of whatever tightening is taking place this week.
Well, you know, I've been giving some thought to that, and I'm not convinced that it will. I think there's a presumption that this early vote is just going to be, you know, it's banked for Hillary, that this is all a Hillary Clinton vote. I just don't get that sense. When you look at the African-American turnout, particularly in places like Florida, where it's down significant percentages, I think that this kind of energy that Trump has right now is going to be too important.
Michael, you're going to stick with us. We'll be right back with a Democrat to help you out in this conversation in just a second.
I'm going to be honest with you right now, because we track. We've got early voting. We've got all kinds of metrics to see what's going on. And right now, the Latino vote is up. Overall vote is up. But the African-American vote right now is not as solid as it needs to be. And I know that there are a lot of people in barbershops and the beauty salons and, you know, in the neighborhoods who are saying to themselves, well, you know, we love Barack, we especially love Michelle, and so, you know, it was exciting, and now we're not excited as much. And you know what? I need everybody to understand that everything we've done is dependent on me being able to pass the baton to somebody who believes in the same things I believe in.
That was President Obama on Tom Joyner's radio show this morning. We're back with the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, Michael Steele, who's out in Washington, D.C. And now joining us from New York, we have Democratic strategist Karine Jean-Pierre, who's the former deputy campaign manager for Martin O'Malley's presidential run. Michael, let me go back to you real quick, just because we left in the middle of our conversation before, and one of the things you were talking about was about the African-American vote, and I'm going to ask Karine about that in a second. But just, we were talking about the early vote, and we were talking about the reasons to think that maybe it's not what people presume, which is that Hillary Clinton's going to do well because she has greater infrastructure, greater ground game, more get out the vote. Talk a little more detail about what we've seen in the last 24 hours in terms of the reporting on the African-American vote? And as I say, give us your sense of that, and then I'm going to ask Karine the same question.
Sure. The bottom line with the African-American vote is that she's not Bill Clinton and she's not Barack Obama. She's never had that kind of relationship with the black community, at least not in my neighborhood in Prince George's County. You don't hear the same level of interest, if you will. Folks don't like Donald Trump. There's no secret about that. But they're not enamored of Hillary Clinton as well. And the Clinton campaign, I think, banked on that black vote being there just because it was Hillary Clinton and Democrats and all of that. But black folks are looking at this race a little bit differently. And they don't have the same level of passion and concern. The numbers are off, is significantly off if you consider the history in 2012 and 2008. And that's why you see Hillary now scrambling in states where she really shouldn't be at this point, trying to get that vote out. And, of course, the president on Tom Joyner's show reminding folks, well, I need to pass the baton to Hillary. And they're like, oh, okay.
Okay, Karine, let me ask you that question. You look at you look at the reporting that we've seen, the big piece in the New York Times today. You see President Obama out. You look at his schedule. You look at where he's going. Yeah. He seems to be, and the Clinton campaign seem to be kind of tacitly admitting something that a lot of people have been concerned about in the Democratic Party for a long time, which is the thing that Michael Steele is pointing to is true. So, do you think it is true that she has a real problem in these closing days with African American votes? And if so, what, if anything, can she do about it?
Well, here's the thing. I think yes, there is an issue. We see it in the numbers. It's down in North Carolina with the African American vote, and also in Florida. But look, we always knew that she would get that percentage, right? That she would get the same percentage as Obama did. The problem that we didn't know, the question was, would she get that raw vote total? And that's what the early voting numbers are showing us, that they have to do a little bit more work. But there was this Slate article that was out on Monday, which I think was actually gave a really interesting insight. It talked about Sanford, North Carolina, right? A small town, 30,000 people, 30% of the electorate there is African American. The Hillary Clinton campaign sent Tim Kaine there because Barack Obama got 30%. So I think that's the type of thing that you're going to see. I mean, and the thing, she's able to do that, right? Yesterday, she and her surrogates were in 14 media markets, and so they are able to kind of spread about and go into those communities where, yesterday you saw Donald Trump in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania with his one of his important surrogates, which is Pence. But she is having her surrogates all over the place, and they can able to do that, what Tim Kaine did on Monday in that small town in Sanford, North Carolina. So I think that's really important.
Right. So I guess the question, Karine, still is this, right? Nobody doubts President Obama in particular is a very powerful surrogate for for Hillary Clinton. But again, the big question has always been transferability. How much, if at this point, 6 days out, if African American voters aren't enthused about Hillary Clinton, and particularly in the context of her running against Donald Trump, what is Barack Obama going to be able to say or do in these 6 days that's going to change that in a measurable way?
No, that's a great question. I think we saw that also in 2010, right? Does the president going out there speaking for elected officials who were running candidates, did that transfer? And it was that transfer didn't actually happen. But I think it's just they just have to continue putting their foot on the gas. They have the ground game, and I think that's what matters. Trump has the momentum, but they have the ground game, and they have they're going to do souls to the polls. They're going to do the barber shop and beauty salon, as the president was mentioning, and they just have to continue to send out the president. He's going to be out there every day. Michelle Obama is going to be out there every day, and they just got to hammer home what's at stake in this election.
Michael, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was going to say, if I could just add to that, the key thing that's really preventing the black community to really kind of jump onto Hillary's bandwagon is that there are elements of Donald Trump's message that resonate with particularly a lot of black entrepreneurs. I've heard it, and I've heard them talk, the small business owners talk about that. So that's what's kind of created that extra level of hesitancy to just go all hog in on Hillary Clinton. I think if Hillary can pivot that message that she has, make it more specific to the black community in terms of entrepreneurship and ownership and opportunity, that may squeeze out that little bit of extra vote. But Donald Trump's message so far on that point does have some sticking value with some small businesses owners in the black community.
Michael, you see Kellyanne Conway and others from the Trump campaign saying, we have expanded the map. We're now playing in more states than we were playing in before. We're seeing Donald Trump go to more states than we've seen him go to before. Hillary Clinton is now playing some defense in some deep blue states. Do you think it's smart right now for the Trump campaign to be spending time in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, New Mexico, places that haven't gone Republican in many cycles? Does that make sense? Or should they, in these final days, be picking the specific states they must win on the narrow path that he has to 270 electoral votes and just camping out there from now until Election Day?
Well, call me crazy. I think it's a good strategy. I really do. I think it's interesting because what you're seeing is, to his offense, the Clinton campaign is now on defense. They're going back into states where they shouldn't have to go, in Colorado and Florida and places like that they thought were going to be slam dunks for them because that's what the numbers said back at the end of summer. So, yeah, I think that this has actually worked out rather smartly for the Trump campaign. But there is still the downside, and the downside is because of a lack of ground game, at least from what we can see, the question remains, are you too trusting of that vote to just show up on its own? And you may need to rethink, and at least in that 72-hour window before Tuesday, put some extra boots on the ground by the campaign to make sure that vote turns out.
Karine, let me ask you this question about Hillary Clinton and her strategy and what she's doing. One of the other things we've noticed, in addition to all this surrogate operation, the surrogate activity that we're seeing, and the concern about some specific things like the African-American vote, we also see her doing something that she didn't want to do, which is going very hard negative against Donald Trump again, talking about his problems with women. She had wanted, her campaign said, to close out this campaign on an optimistic, positive, kind of unifying message. And now, again, she's back to the disqualification message that she was on for many, many months. Tell me whether you think that is necessary and wise for her to be going back and mostly focusing on Trump rather than kind of shifting to a different kind of stance in these closing days.
Well, yeah. Well, John, here, as we saw what happened on Friday night with the Comey letter, it kind of changed the stakes a little bit here. So I think what she's doing, especially now, I mean, people aren't, Election Day is actually not on November 8th. It's actually happening right now. Millions and millions of people, almost over 20 million people are voting early. So what she's doing is trying to remind people, right, hey, this is the character of the other side. Just to remind you, this is what was going on. This is why Donald Trump is unfit to be president. And so, that's the message that she's going on. There's some positive messages as well if you watch her town hall, which I know you do, John. But she is really hammering home to the Americans who are voting right now about the character of Donald Trump. And also, one thing I wanted to say here is that we saw the 3 days, 72 hours after the Comey letter, she was able to raise online $11.3 million. So she has the money to go into Colorado, right, to go to Michigan and not leave anything on the table. And I think that's key here. As we know, this has been a volatile election cycle. So I think that's actually a very smart thing to do, to make sure that you have the money, spend it, don't leave anything on the table.
All right, Karine, just a quick yes or no answer to this question. Will there be another big October or even November surprise now that we're in November? Do we have a November surprise now between now and next Tuesday?
You know, I want to say no, but this has been so unprecedented. I wouldn't be surprised if there was another surprise, a November surprise at this point.
Michael Steele, what's your thought?
Yes,
November surprise, yes or no?
I think yes. I think there will be more to come. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for that, guys. I'm sort of tired of these surprises. I was hoping you both say no. But since you both say yes, I guess I'm going to have to put on my seatbelt now and get ready for another high-impact event. All right, Karine Jean-Pierre, thank you. Michael Steele, thank you. We have got a Republican roundtable, or at least a little Republican duopoly coming up next. David Kochel and Anthony Scaramucci join us in just a moment. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back. was a time, a long time ago, when our next guests were working toward a shared goal of helping to make Jeb Bush the nominee of the Republican Party. Now they stand divided on their support for Donald Trump. Joining us now is the former senior strategist to Jeb Bush's presidential campaign. That's Dave Kochel, who joins us from Harvard University. And in New York, Anthony Scaramucci, the founder of Skybridge Capital, who was on Jeb Bush's National Finance Committee and is now a member of Donald Trump's Economic Policy Council. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to start you both with the same question that I start everybody with at this point, because I'm sorry, whether you like the horse race or not, we're less than a week out and it's a horse race moment. So, Kochel, where do you see the race right now?
Well, certainly there's a trend right now in Donald Trump's favor. I think the fundamentals are still pretty difficult. There's some states that he's just never led in and may never lead in that he has to win at least one or two of here in the closing days in order to get himself to 270. It doesn't look likely, but if I'm the Clinton campaign right now, I'm maybe thinking about going out and buying about 10,000 bedpans, because there's certainly a lot of worry starting to build in the Clinton campaign, given where they're spending money and where they're going.
Anthony, do you feel like right now, do you feel like the race is where? I mean, do you think your guy is now suddenly pulled level with her, or are you still having to play like the comeback kid?
Well, listen, some of the polls say that he's ahead of her. Some of the polls say tied. There's a few say he's behind. But the momentum is our trend. And so you know that in sports. Same thing is true in politics. My guess is that he's going to bring more people to the game on November the 8th than Secretary Clinton. And obviously, President Obama is super worried about that, because that's why he's doing these radio shows. So my guess is that this is going to be close. But I think Mr. Trump is going to pull this off on November the 8th, and he'll be the next president. He'll be the 45th president of the U.S. And then we're going to invite David and all those people that used to work with me with Jeb Bush into the tent, because we're going to have to govern, and we're going to have to all figure out a way to get along together.
Anthony, I'll ask you this question about the way that Donald Trump's spending his time right now. One of those things he's doing is he's spending a lot of time in these kind of very deep blue states. You got him in Wisconsin. Talking about he's been in North Carolina, talking about Michigan. You're a man who is a data guy, as a man of the markets.
Yeah.
When you look at those states and you look at the history in those states, does it seem to you to make a lot of sense for your candidate to be spending scarce time in states that have not voted for a Republican in a very long time?
Well, remember the two states like Michigan and Wisconsin, they have Republican governors, and the Republican governors are certainly helping them there. I was in Macomb County a few weeks back, which we all know is a Democratic county, driving around, and there was one Trump placard after the next, which is why guys like Michael Moore are saying, ladies and gentlemen, wake up, Donald Trump is going to be the next president. So this is an unorthodox thing about Mr. Trump. It's probably not super data dependent, but my guess is that some of these internal polls are telling him he's in striking distance in those places. And it's a little bit of sending a message that he's going to be president for all Americans. And so that's why he's got a message out there for the African-American community, the Latino community. He wants to build a presidential coalition that includes everybody. And so the blue strategy is, listen, we're going to turn this into a purple nation, and we're going to make this a presidency for all the American people. So I like the strategy. And I think it'll pan out for him, as most of the things that he has done with his intuition.
David, let me ask you. I know this is when I ask people to play this kind of hypothetical game, sometimes it gives them some agita, some pain, and in this case, I'm going to inflict some on you. Pretend you're Donald Trump's campaign manager or chief strategist. Would you be having him spend his time the way he's currently spending his time, or would you be pursuing a different path?
I think they've got most of it right. I would probably spend all of my time for the next few days in Wisconsin, New Hampshire. I might try Virginia. They've got him going back to Iowa on Monday. I'm not sure that's a good call. It looks like he's got Iowa pretty close to being put away. Look, the coalition that has brought him where he is are non-college educated, white working class voters. You have a lot of them in Wisconsin who weren't there for Mitt Romney, frankly, in the 2012 election, and they weren't there for John McCain in 2008. You have a lot of them in New Hampshire as well. I think he's going to have to take one of those two blue states. You could probably make an argument for Virginia. I know there's been a little bit of tightening of the polls there. I just don't think there's a coalition that exists for him in Virginia to win. I think where he's got to go is New Hampshire, Wisconsin, and that's about it. I don't see him winning in Colorado. I don't see really any opportunity for him to break through in Michigan. I don't think that there are enough white working class voters there to put him over the top. So I'm probably spending most of my time in those two states. Probably hit Florida again just to make sure you've got that, as a state where you can kind of lock it home. Obviously, he doesn't win this election unless he runs the table on all of the states that have been swing states over the last 6 or 8 weeks, and then he's got to go take another state or two, and I think the opportunities are Wisconsin and New Hampshire.
Dave, let me stay with you just because of one thing you said, which is now kind of taken for granted, which is that of the traditional battleground states, that Iowa is his strongest state. We see that in the polling all the time. You are an Iowa guy, a Des Moines resident. Just explain this to me. I mean, I know that, but part of the answer is demographics and that it's an overwhelmingly white state. It was an overwhelmingly white state in 2012 and 2008 when Barack Obama won it. So what's changed in Iowa that makes Iowa so much more receptive to Donald Trump than it was to Mitt Romney or to John McCain?
Well, I think the wrong track number is driving a lot of this. There's a lot more frustration among voters. I think, you saw it in the off years of 10 and 14 where you had, a much higher turnout among, sort of disaffected, angry voters, upset at Washington. Trump seems to have really struck a chord with these voters. And then you have on the other side, the Clinton campaign is just not an inspiring campaign. She doesn't have a good message for voters like that. I think Obama was new and fresh and hopeful, and I think the wrong track number wasn't as high in 2012 as it is today. Even though the economy seems to be improving at a slow rate, like there's no credit being given to Washington or to the Obama campaign or the Obama administration necessarily. And so Hillary Clinton has kind of failed to inspire a coalition of new voters that Obama inspired in 2008 and 2012 with just incredibly high turnout in Democratic precincts, even in whiter states like Iowa and Ohio. It's just not happening for her, and that's where the opportunity is for Trump.
All right, Dave Kochel, Anthony Scaramucci, stay with us. We'll continue this conversation in all its glory after these words from our sponsors. back with Republican strategist Dave Kochel and Anthony Scaramucci, a member of Donald Trump's Economic Policy Council. He's also the author of the book, Hopping Over the Rabbit Hole. It's a fabulous book. Everyone should buy it. Anthony, I want to ask you one question, which is one of my hobby horses. I'm going to talk about Donald Trump's taxes. Yesterday, we saw in the New York Times another pretty brutal story that suggests that Trump has basically manipulated the tax rules, or not manipulated the rules, but played by the rules in a way that allowed him not pay taxes for many, many years. We saw an earlier New York Times story that suggested that, given that Donald Trump has refused, in contravention of all norms of the way that presidential nominees in our country normally behave, to release his taxes, and we've seen now these stories, how can we come to any other conclusion but that Donald Trump has basically not paid taxes for decades?
Well, listen, I think that's unfair. He's acknowledged that he's paid millions and millions of dollars of taxes. I think the big issue for Mr. Trump, because it's such a complex tax form, and you've seen that Facebook and Twitter page where he's got 7 feet of tax papers that he's going through. He doesn't feel, as a businessman, and you guys have to remember this, he's not a politician for the last 30 years that have these more simplified tax returns. And so what I would say to you is that he's done everything ethically and legally. Judge Leonard Hand, if you went to law school, there's a very famous case that says you can do everything that you can within legal limits to avoid paying taxes, and perhaps Mr. Trump has done that. But if there was something wrong there, the IRS would certainly have let us know by now.
All right. He has basically in those debates, he sort of conceded the possibility that maybe, in fact, he really hasn't paid taxes, federal taxes at least, for a long time. Dave, let me ask you that question. Same basic question. Is there any reason why I should conclude anything other than that Donald Trump hasn't paid taxes for a long time on the basis of his behavior?
I don't think there's any reason to conclude anything other than what we already know, which is that he took $1 billion loss, almost $1 billion loss, which would have allowed him to go, I think, 2 years into the past and then 16 years into the future and write those losses off against any other income. My guess is he probably hasn't paid any taxes in that long, and that's why he's not releasing them. I mean, he doesn't want people to know that he hasn't paid taxes.
All right, Dave. Sorry, I got to cut you off. Anthony Scaramucci and Dave Kochel, thank you both for being on the show, and we'll be right back. Thanks for watching, everyone. From me and Mark, good night and sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of first word news. With less than a week to go before Election Day, Hillary Clinton's focus is on Arizona, a reliably Republican stronghold that could be in play. Donald Trump, who's been reinvigorated by the FBI's new email review, is in Florida, a battleground state whose electoral votes could determine whether he wins the White House. The latest ABC News Washington Post tracking poll has Clinton and Trump tied at 46%. And for the first time, the survey indicates Trump is seen as more honest. Among independent voters, a new Bloomberg Politics poll shows Hillary Clinton with a narrow edge. In a race involving third-party candidates, Clinton leads 30% to 27%. A senior Russian diplomat's urging the next U.S. president to work with Moscow to end the war in Syria. Alexei Bodrodovkin also defended Russia's military intervention as a fight against terrorism. Thursday is Decision Day on a challenge over British Prime Minister Theresa May's authority to initiate the country's exit from the European Union. That's according to a lawyer in the case who says a ruling is expected from a panel of senior judges in the morning. Prime Minister May wants to begin the process next March. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. Bloomberg Technology is next.
And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, a Wednesday earnings bonanza with Facebook leading the charge. Shares down more than 8%. Our expectations for the social network just